For over half a century, a quiet yet incredibly powerful question has stirred deep within the heart of the Catholic Church. It's a question that touches on identity, on tradition, on what it means to worship God. What will truly happen to the traditional Latin Mass? Once the universal, revered form of worship for Roman Catholics, practiced for centuries across continents, this ancient liturgy, also known as the Tridentine Mass, was largely set aside after the seismic changes of the Second Vatican Council. In its place, a new liturgy was introduced in 1969, known as the Novus Ordo, or the New Order of Mass. Since that pivotal moment, Catholics around the world have lived with a growing, palpable tension, some deeply connected to the newer form, finding in it fresh vitality and clarity, while others have felt an undeniable pull, a spiritual longing to return to the ancient rites of the Church, to the Latin whispers and solemn gestures that shaped generations of saints. This deep-seated tension, often simmering beneath the surface, reached a dramatic and painful new level in 2021. Pope Francis, with a stroke of his pen, issued a document titled Traditionis Custodes, meaning guardians of tradition. This decree placed strict, unprecedented limits on the celebration of the Latin Mass, effectively reversing policies that had allowed it to flourish. The impact was immediate. It caused widespread confusion, exacerbated existing divisions, and for countless faithful Catholics, brought a profound sense of heartbreak and spiritual displacement. But now, the air crackles with anticipation. Everything could change once again. The year is 2025, and a new pope has been elected, Pope Leo. From his very first public Mass, people began to notice something profoundly different. The way he celebrated the liturgy, his palpable reverence, his deliberate choice of Latin in key moments, the traditional vestments he donned, sometimes even those passed down from past centuries, and his slow, careful, deeply focused gestures at the altar. To many, it felt like a return, a quiet echo of the style of Pope Benedict XVI, a pontiff revered for his deep appreciation of liturgical beauty. Some even whispered, "This feels like the old church again." Yet, while these powerful symbolic actions speak volumes, Pope Leo has, so far, remained utterly silent on one key, defining issue. Will he restore the traditional Latin Mass to its former place, allowing its organic growth? Or will he continue the path of restriction, maintaining the limitations imposed by his predecessor? Today, we're going to step into the Vatican's quiet halls and explore 3 realistic paths Pope Leo might take in the months ahead. What he decides, the direction he charts, could irrevocably shape the Church for generations to come, impacting millions of souls and influencing the very spiritual landscape of Catholicism. To truly understand where things might go under Pope Leo, to grasp the weight of this moment, we must first look back at how this complex, deeply emotional liturgical saga began. For centuries, the traditional Latin Mass wasn't just a way Catholics worshipped. It was the way. It was the bedrock of Catholic identity around the world, a liturgical inheritance passed down through generations. It carried a deep, almost palpable sense of silence, profound reverence, and sacred mystery. The prayers were almost exclusively said in Latin, uniting diverse peoples under a single tongue. The priest faced the altar, a symbol of leading the faithful ad orientem, towards the east, towards Christ. Every word, every ancient gesture, every movement followed a precise rhythm, a timeless choreography shaped and refined over many, many centuries. This was the spiritual home for countless saints, mystics, and ordinary believers. But then, in the tumultuous 1960s, the Church embarked on a period of massive, sweeping change. At the Second Vatican Council, bishops from across the globe gathered in Rome, tasked with discussing how the Church should best meet the modern world, how it could open its windows to contemporary society. One significant result of these historic deliberations was a strong desire to reform the Mass. In 1969, a new liturgy, the Novus Ordo, was formally introduced by Pope Paul VI. This new form emphasized the use of the local vernacular language instead of Latin, making the prayers more immediately understandable to the average layperson. The priest now typically faced the people, fostering a sense of community and dialogue. The overall structure was simplified, with some ancient rites streamlined or removed. For many, it felt like a fresh, liberating beginning, a necessary modernization that would make the Mass more accessible and engaging. However, not everyone agreed. From the outset, a significant number of Catholics, including prominent theologians and lay faithful, felt that the new Mass, despite its intentions, had lost something sacred, something of the profound mystery and continuity of the ancient rite. Over time, groups began to form specifically to preserve and celebrate the old Latin Mass. Some of these communities remained fiercely loyal to the Vatican, seeking to celebrate the traditional liturgy within official church structures. Others, like the Society of St. Pius X, SSPX, resisted more openly, feeling that the reforms had gone too far, and in doing so, created significant tension and a complicated, often strained relationship with church leadership. Then, in 2007, Pope Benedict XVI, a profound theologian with a deep love for the Church's heritage, did something truly historic. He released a document titled Summorum Pontificum. This landmark decree famously stated that the traditional Latin Mass had never been juridically abolished, and even more significantly, it declared that every priest in the Roman Rite had the freedom to celebrate it without needing special permission from his bishop. Benedict expressed his desire for what he called mutual enrichment, envisioning a future where both forms of the Mass could exist side by side, learning from and complementing each other. For a while, there was a tentative peace. In many dioceses around the world, both forms of the Mass were indeed celebrated side by side. Faithful Catholics could choose the liturgy that best nourished their souls, and the number of Latin Mass communities began to grow quietly, steadily, around the world, often attracting young families and new vocations. But in 2021, that delicate peace was shattered. Pope Francis issued Traditionis Custodes, a document that fundamentally reversed Benedict's policy. It declared that the Latin Mass should be limited, stating that bishops needed explicit, special permission from Rome to even allow it in their dioceses. New priests, it mandated, couldn't be trained in it without direct Roman approval, and perhaps most painfully for many, it could no longer be offered in parish churches, forcing communities into less accessible, often smaller, locations. Many Catholics were utterly shocked, and for those who had experienced the vibrant growth of young families, new vocations, and deep devotion flourishing around the Latin Mass, it felt like a door was suddenly, abruptly closing. Some bishops, perhaps reluctantly, followed the new rules quickly. Others, in their pastoral wisdom, quietly allowed these communities to continue, seeking a path of understanding. This is the precise, pivotal moment Pope Leo has walked into. He is now standing at a crossroads with three very different, consequential paths stretching out before him. Since the day Pope Leo stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, accepting the cheers and prayers of the faithful, many Catholics around the world have been watching him with intense scrutiny. They haven't just been listening to what he says in his homilies or official addresses. They've been observing what he does, paying close attention to the subtle yet powerful signals embedded in his liturgical style. And what they've noticed has given rise to both profound hope and intense curiosity. From his very first Mass as Pontiff, it was undeniably clear that this Pope values reverence and tradition. He used more Latin than is typical in the Novus Ordo, a choice that resonated deeply with those longing for ancient echoes. He wore traditional vestments, some appearing to be historical pieces from past centuries, evoking a sense of continuity. His gestures at the altar were slow, careful, and deeply focused, conveying a profound sense of the sacred. To many, particularly those who remember the pontificate of Pope Benedict XVI, it felt like that scholarly, prayerful style had returned. Some even openly said, "This feels like the old church again." But while these small yet incredibly significant signals matter deeply to a segment of the faithful, Pope Leo has, so far, refrained from making any official, direct move regarding the traditional Latin Mass itself. Traditionis Custodes, issued by Pope Francis, is still legally in effect. Bishops still need special permission from Rome to permit its celebration. Some Latin Mass communities around the world remain limited, or even under direct pressure to cease. And yet other signs continue to fuel the hopes of traditional Catholics. Pope Leo has spoken kindly, even warmly, about Cardinal Raymond Burke, a prominent figure and strong, consistent supporter of the Latin Mass. He has also frequently emphasized the universal importance of beauty, silence, and sacredness in the liturgy, ideas often intrinsically connected to the traditional form of worship. Then, there was something else, something highly symbolic, that occurred on May 13th, 2025. On this significant date, the anniversary of the very first Marian apparition in Fatima, Portugal, a date that, for generations, was also the traditional feast day when the Latin Mass was offered, Pope Leo's papacy was officially consecrated to Our Lady of Fatima. To many, this wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It felt like a quiet yet powerful signal, a subtle nod to a traditional devotion deeply cherished by those who love the ancient liturgy. So now, the Church waits. Will Pope Leo finally speak? Will he act decisively? Or will he leave things as they are, allowing the current restrictions to remain in place? This is the central question of his early pontificate for many. In the next part of our story, we'll delve into three possible futures, three distinct paths Pope Leo could choose. We'll explore what each one could mean for the deeply divided landscape of the Church, and for the countless faithful who are watching, waiting, and praying. With the entire Church watching closely, perhaps holding its breath, Pope Leo stands before a monumentally important decision. He could take one of three main paths, each with radically different consequences for the liturgy and for the unity of the Catholic faithful. Let's look at each possibility, understanding the hopes and fears each one brings. In this first scenario, and perhaps the most longed for by traditional Catholics, Pope Leo decides to completely cancel Traditionis Custodes and, in a profound act of continuity, bring back Summorum Pontificum. This would mean that every priest in the Roman Rite would once again be explicitly allowed to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass without needing any special permission from his local bishop or from Rome. This bold move would feel like a full, triumphant return to what Pope Benedict XVI began in 2007. Under this plan, the Latin Mass would no longer be seen as something extra, something tolerated or suspicious, but instead would be recognized, unequivocally, as a normal, valid, and deeply respected part of Catholic life. Seminaries could begin teaching it again without bureaucratic hurdles. Parishes might offer it more regularly, integrated into their weekly schedules. Bishops would be encouraged to genuinely welcome and facilitate both forms of the Mass in their dioceses, fostering mutual respect. This would undoubtedly bring immense joy and profound relief to traditional Catholic communities around the world. It could also begin the difficult but necessary work of repairing the deep hurt and sense of alienation caused by the 2021 restrictions. However, we must acknowledge there would also be significant pushback. Some bishops and theologians, particularly those who deeply embraced the post-Vatican II reforms, might argue that restoring the old form too fully could confuse the faithful, or even reverse what they see as the essential goals of the Second Vatican Council. Others might fear that it would encourage liturgical division, creating a sense of two churches within one, or send the unintended message that the newer Mass, the Novus Ordo, is somehow less holy or less valid. Still, for many, this option represents the path to unity through true liturgical diversity, a way of allowing both forms of the Mass to exist peacefully, side by side, enriching each other as Benedict XVI had hoped. In this second possibility, Pope Leo chooses a middle way, a path of careful balance. Instead of either fully restoring the Latin Mass or rigidly keeping the strictest limits, he might issue a new decree that grants some degree of freedom back to priests, but still requires meaningful cooperation and oversight from bishops. For example, priests might be allowed to say the Latin Mass privately, without needing explicit permission, recognizing their inherent right to the traditional rite. However, public Masses could still be offered only with the bishop's direct approval, ensuring pastoral oversight. Seminaries might be allowed to teach the traditional Latin Mass again, but perhaps as an optional subject, recognizing its place as part of the Church's heritage without making it mandatory. Parishes could request Latin Masses, but the final decisions would still depend heavily on local circumstances and the discretion of the diocesan ordinary. This middle path would offer some much-needed flexibility, especially in dioceses where bishops are already open or sympathetic to the Latin Mass. But in areas with more resistance, where bishops might hold reservations, the old liturgy might still remain rare or largely unavailable. This measured approach is the one many church observers and experts believe is most likely. It would allow Pope Leo to avoid a direct, potentially divisive conflict with the immediate legacy of Pope Francis, while simultaneously responding to the genuine spiritual needs and deep desires of those Catholics who love the traditional liturgy. However, this option also has its inherent weaknesses. It places a significant amount of power and discretion in the hands of individual bishops, meaning that the experience of faithful Catholics could vary wildly from diocese to diocese. In some places, Latin Mass communities might thrive, while in others, they could still face ongoing restrictions or passive resistance. For that reason, many traditional Catholics might see this as a temporary compromise, a holding pattern, rather than a definitive, long-term solution. The third option is the most difficult, the most disappointing, for traditional Catholics. In this scenario, Pope Leo would choose to simply leave Traditionis Custodes untouched, keeping the current restrictions exactly as they are. This would mean no major changes, no public comments to ease the tension, just a continued, impactful silence on the matter. Priests would still need permission from their bishop to celebrate the Latin Mass. Seminaries might not be permitted to train new priests in it without special, exceptional approval from Rome. Public Latin Masses would remain limited to specific, often inconvenient locations, frequently outside of regular parish churches. If this happens, many faithful Catholics, particularly those deeply invested in the traditional Latin Mass, will feel profoundly disappointed, frustrated, or even abandoned. Some, sadly, might even stop attending Mass altogether, feeling that their spiritual home has been diminished or denied. Others might turn to groups like the Society of St. Pius X, which, while not in full canonical communion with Rome, continues to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass openly and without restriction. Keeping the current restrictions would also inevitably raise more perplexing questions in the minds of many. Why has Pope Leo himself embraced beautiful liturgies and traditional styles in his own celebrations, yet kept silence on the Latin Mass for others? Why would he seemingly ignore the leaked bishop's report, which, as we'll discuss, suggested widespread support for the traditional liturgy among diocesan ordinaries? While this option may seem like the safe route from inside the Vatican, avoiding immediate confrontation, it risks creating more profound and enduring division over time, deepening the wounds within the Church. So these are the three distinct roads ahead: a full restoration, a nuanced middle way with ongoing controls, or no change at all. While Pope Leo, as the successor of Peter, holds the ultimate authority to decide, it's crucial to understand that there are powerful outside forces that could significantly shape what happens next. These are the wild cards, unexpected events or realities that could tip the delicate balance toward one option or another, subtly influencing the Pontiff's eventual decision. Let's look at some of the biggest ones. First, consider the bombshell that dropped in July 2025. Journalist Diane Montagna published a leaked document that sent shockwaves through the Catholic world. This document contained genuine, unfiltered feedback from bishops around the globe regarding the traditional Latin Mass. And to the surprise of many who had only heard official narratives, most of this feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Bishops reported that Latin Mass communities were consistently strong in faith and devotion, often bringing in young families, producing a disproportionately high number of new vocations to the priesthood, and actively supporting their local parishes and dioceses. This leaked report stood in sharp, almost damning contrast to the reasons given for Traditionis Custodes in 2021, which had claimed the Latin Mass was causing division and pride. Now Catholics everywhere are asking, why were we told the bishops were against it, when it turns out they were actually largely in favor? This stunning revelation puts significant pressure on Pope Leo. If he chooses to act in favor of the traditional Latin Mass, it may not be seen as a mere personal opinion, but rather as a correction based on new, verifiable facts, addressing concerns that were previously misrepresented. Another critical factor is the rapid, undeniable expansion of the Society of St. Pius X. This group, which exclusively celebrates the traditional Latin Mass, has a long and complicated relationship with the Vatican. Although not yet in full canonical recognition, the SSPX is growing quickly, both in the number of its members and, crucially, in its seminarians. Some estimates suggest it now has over 700 priests worldwide, with many more being ordained. If Pope Leo continues the current restrictions on the Latin Mass, it's a near certainty that many faithful Catholics, feeling spiritually unmoored, will turn to the Society of St. Pius X instead, seeing it as their only refuge for the liturgy they love. This, inevitably, could deepen the divide within the Church, creating more tension between traditional Catholics and mainstream Church authorities. Even more concerning, the Society of St. Pius X may soon consecrate new bishops, a move that could tragically repeat the crisis of 1988, when Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre did so without papal permission, resulting in excommunications and years of painful conflict. The Vatican undoubtedly wants to avoid facing that kind of confrontation again, a scenario that would further fracture the Church. This makes the Society of St. Pius X an increasingly key player in how this entire liturgical drama unfolds. More than ever before, ordinary Catholics are speaking up, their voices amplified by modern technology. Social media, podcasts, and independent Catholic YouTube channels have created an unprecedented space for people to share their deep love for the Latin Mass and their very real pain when it's taken away from them. In recent years, countless individuals have written heartfelt letters, created powerful videos, signed petitions, or traveled long distances, sometimes across entire regions, just to attend one traditional Latin Mass each week. Some, driven by conviction, have even changed dioceses or moved across the country to find a place where the ancient liturgy is celebrated freely. This extraordinary level of commitment, this profound spiritual passion, shows that the Latin Mass is not just a passing preference for many. For them, it's central to their spiritual life, a fundamental part of their relationship with God. That kind of passion, that kind of fervent devotion, is not easily silenced. Pope Leo, as the universal shepherd of the Church, may feel that listening to these voices calmly and clearly is not just a political calculation, but a solemn part of his duty. Finally, there's the overarching issue of unity itself. The Church has been through a lot of tension and internal strife in recent years. Some Catholics feel deeply attached to the Novus Ordo, others passionately love the Latin Mass. Some feel pushed out, marginalized, others feel judged, or that their own legitimate spiritual preferences are questioned. If Pope Leo can find a way to bring genuine peace, not by choosing one side over another, but by generously recognizing both forms of the Mass as valuable, legitimate expressions of Catholic worship, he may begin the crucial work of healing wounds that have been left open for far too long. His decisions won't please everyone. No papal decision ever does. But if made carefully, prayerfully, and with a profound desire for authentic unity, they could truly lead to a more unified, a more reverent, and ultimately, a more Christ-centered church. For some, the traditional Latin Mass is an essential link to the past, a sacred doorway into the profound silence, the enduring mystery, and the unparalleled beauty that shaped countless saints for centuries. For others, the newer liturgy, the Novus Ordo, is a vibrant sign of the Church, reaching out to the modern world with fresh clarity and pastoral simplicity. But ultimately, this is not, and never has been, a simple battle of old versus new. It is a deeper, more fundamental question. How do we, the Catholic faithful, worship God with the greatest reverence, the deepest unity, and the purest truth? Pope Leo now carries the immense weight of that question, a burden that defines his papacy. Whatever decision he ultimately makes, whether it is bold and definitive or cautious and nuanced, will undoubtedly shape the future of the Church's worship, and the entire world is watching. But even as we wait, as the drama of papal decision-making unfolds, the fundamental work of faith continues. We can still pray with profound devotion. We can still seek holiness in the quiet confines of our homes and within our local parishes, regardless of the liturgical form. We can still love Christ in every form he comes to us, especially in the sacred mystery of the Eucharist. The future of the liturgy matters deeply, yes, but even more than that, the Church needs hearts on fire for Christ, souls consumed by his love and his truth. So let us watch with spiritual attentiveness, let us hope with unwavering faith, and above all, let us remain faithful, rooted deeply in Christ, no matter which path is chosen, because God remains with his Church always.